Welcome to Talk It Up, a Christian parenting podcast where our goal is to discuss 21st century topics to help you raise your kids. Welcome back to Talk It Up, a Christian parenting podcast to help parents raise their kids in the 21st century. We are beyond excited today to welcome a couple guests with us as we dive into something that you possibly have heard of when it comes to love languages. And with us today, the first guest that we have is Dr. Gary Chapman. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Gary Chapman.
Well, thank you, Matt and Wendy. It's good to be with you.
Absolutely. And as he mentioned, my other guest is my wife, Wendy, and excited to have you to bring another perspective because God knows I can't bring a full perspective of our kids without you on board. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And Dr. Chapman, just real quick, just to give an oversight of what you've done in the past, which is just incredible, but you have a book, The 5 Love Languages, and it's a New York Times bestseller. It's sold over 20 million copies. We use it here in marriage counseling, and I know a lot of other people do. We were fortunate enough to have you here on our campus at Mount Bethel this last year in February of 24. And it was just remarkable to hear how the love languages were put together. So thank you again for being here. Can you give us just like an oversight of the 5 love languages before we get into talking about the love languages for children?
Yes, there's 5 fundamental ways to express love that will touch the other person emotionally. The whole objective is to meet the emotional need to feel loved, which I think all of us agree is one of our most fundamental emotional needs. Mm-hmm. And so what I discovered is these 5 languages. One is words of affirmation. These are no particular order of importance, but words of affirmation. Just looking for something in the other person that you can genuinely affirm. Words speak loudly to some people. And then a second love language is acts of service. It's doing something for the other person. In a marriage, that would be things like washing dishes and vacuuming floors and cooking meals and walking the dog. Anything. And for some people, actions speak louder than words. And if this is their love language, actions will speak louder than words. And then there's gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. The gift says, they were thinking about me. Look what they got from me. And the gift doesn't have to be expensive. We've always said it's the thought that counts. And then there's quality time, giving the other person your undivided attention. And I don't mean husband and wife sitting on the couch looking at TV. TV has your attention. I'm saying TV's off, computer's down. We're giving each other our full undivided attention. And the number 5 is physical touch. We've long known the emotional power of physical touch. In a marriage, that's such things as holding hands and kissing and embracing, the whole sexual part of marriage, arm around the shoulder, driving down the road, you put your hand on their leg, sitting around the house and they walk by, you trip them. I'm kidding on that one. Don't trip your spouse, okay?
I'm going to try that tonight.
I'm clumsy. So
those are the 5 that I discovered with married couples. And sometime after that, people kept asking me, Dr. Chapman, does this apply to children? And I felt that it did, but I hadn't had that much experience. So I asked Dr. Ross Campbell, who was a Christian, I say was because he's in heaven now. He was a Christian psychiatrist who has spent 30 years working with children. And so we teamed up and wrote this book, Applying the 5 Love Languages to Children, which we've had tremendous response to, and it's helped many parents effectively communicate love to their children.
I believe it, and that's what we'll dive into today is this 5 love languages of children. And you and Dr. Campbell, you say the secret to loving children effectively. And so if you were to give us just like a 30,000 foot view of this book, how would you say that you can that this book helps parents like look at building better relationships with their kids?
Well, I would start by saying the question is not, do you love your children? We love our children by nature. The question is, do your children feel loved? I remember a 13-year-old who was in my office, and he said to me, he'd run away from home, and he ended up in my office. And he said to me, my parents don't love me. They love my brother, but they don't love me. I knew his parents. I knew they loved him. It's just they had never discovered that what makes one child feel loved doesn't make another child feel loved. That children have a primary love language, and you can be speaking love to them in one of the other languages, but if it's not their primary and you don't speak their primary, they won't feel loved. So the book is helping couples, parents or single parents for that matter, effectively communicate love to the children by discovering their primary love language. And I don't mean you only speak the primary language. No, I want you to speak all five, because we'd like for the child to learn how to receive love and later give love in all five languages. That's the healthiest child and the healthiest adult. But if you don't discover that primary love language and give heavy doses of it, your child will not feel loved, even though in your mind you are loving them.
Yes. So we have two teenage boys, 18 and 14, and all four of us speak a different primary love language. My question is, do you find it, as a parent, is it harder or easier to speak your child's love language if it's the same as yours?
Well, I think theoretically it would be easier. If your love language is words of affirmation, we tend to speak our own love language. So it makes it easier for us to communicate words of affirmation to the child. If words of affirmation is your number 5, just not very important to you at all, then you probably don't speak many words of affirmation, because in your mind, it doesn't register that this would be something powerful to do for a child. So yeah, I think theoretically, whatever your primary love language is, if one of your children has the same primary language, it would be easier for you to speak that language.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'm glad you asked it, and great response. I can definitely see that in our kids and how we've raised them and the things that they actually latch onto. At what age do kids develop, or what age can parents see the love languages develop in their kids? Is there a specific age? I know that you've talked about a couple younger. I've even seen 5 to 8 in the back of your book, that you start like this, the discovery process of finding love languages.
Yeah, I think you can actually, for most children, discover their primary language by the age of 4.
Oh, wow.
But certainly by 5, you can begin to see it. And one way is simply to observe how they express love to you and other people. If they're always, grabbing your legs and, hugging you and want to sit beside of you or sit on your lap if they're little, that's a clue that that's what they want.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
When my son was about that age, 4 or 5 years of age, his language is physical touch. So when I would come home from work, he'd run to the door, grab my legs, and climb on me. He was touching me because he wants to be touched. Our daughter never did that. At that age, our daughter would say, "Daddy, come into my room. I want to show you something." She wanted quality time. She wanted my undivided attention. So it's there very early. And people have often asked me, is this nature or nurture? Are they born with a love language, or do they develop it early? And my answer is, I don't know. I don't know. It may be a little of both, but I do know that it's there pretty early in a child's life. You can discover their primary love language.
Yeah, when you came in February, our boys were able to come and be a part of that as well, and they were excited to take your quiz. And I, as a mom, was not surprised at all by what their primary love language is. I could look back and see that from a very small age in both of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though they're different.
Did we do a good job in raising them, looking back now and knowing what their primary love language was? Because we didn't know it when they were 5 and 6 and 7 and 8.
Right.
We might have recognized it a little bit, but we didn't define it like what your book does in helping us to define it. And did we do a good job?
I think so. So. They turned out good. Our older one, who's 18, his love language is physical touch. Yeah. And, even though that's not my primary love language, I was always the, huggy, kissy, sit in my lap, snuggle. We always did that. Where our younger one, He did that some, but he wasn't the kid that wanted to crawl in your lap and read a book. He would say, no, read to me. And when he was little, he wanted to play cards or do whatever. And his is gifts. And I can absolutely see that. He loves, you give him any little thing, big or small, and he's very excited about that. Which that actually opens up a question of when it is gifts, their love language is gifts. How do you keep from it only being about materialistic things with your child and not them being, a spoiled brat?
Well, I think first of all, remember that you're the parent, and if you love the child, you are going to give them gifts that are meaningful to them at their age, which means we don't necessarily give them everything they're asking us for, even if it is their primary language. And I suggest to parents, they say, honey, I love you too much to give you that right now, because I don't think you're ready for it. You see, look, God doesn't give us everything we ask.
That's right.
Aren't we glad?
Yeah.
That's right.
Many times I've looked back and thought, I'm glad I didn't get what I prayed for.
Absolutely. God loves us too much to give us something we're asking for if he knows it's not good for us. And as parents, we're hopefully have more wisdom than our children. And so what we want to do is give them gifts that will be meaningful to them where they are, not give them gifts until they're ready for those particular gifts. So I think that's an important point to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is. You hit on discovering love languages for your kids, and you wrote about this in the book, and you had 5 different things I can read real quick that I thought were great. Observe how your child expresses love to you was the first one. Observe how your child expresses love to others. Listen to what your child requests most often. Notice what your child most frequently complains about, and give your child a choice between 2 options. Those were 5 points that you and Dr. Campbell wrote about in the book on discovering your child's love language. Looking at those 5 and thinking about those, is there something that stands out in your mind, or something that you remember when you wrote this down, or something that you've experienced that elevates one of those maybe above the other 4?
Well, I think some of them work well with some children and they don't work well with others. But if a child is asking you, Mommy, can we play? Mommy, can we play? Mommy, can we play? And they keep on asking you, can we do this? Can we do it? They're begging you for quality time.
They are.
They want your undivided attention. And so sometimes that is a powerful clue as to what their primary language is. Another you mentioned is their complaints. I had a mother say to me just recently, she said, my 6-year-old son said to me last week, we don't ever go to the park anymore since the baby came. He used to have his mother's undivided attention at the park. It's he and his mother. Now the baby's here. He's complaining. And so if we listen to their complaints, they're giving us valuable information. And then, of course, for some children also, if you can't figure out with those first 2 or 3, that whole thing of giving them a choice. Yeah. I've got a free hour, and you and I could take a walk in the park, or we could go to the store and buy, something that they've been wanting. Which would you rather do? So one is a gift and one is quality time. And so you give them choices like that, and they'll tend to request the thing that is their primary most often. So, yeah. But I think those are just informal ways to discover a child's primary love language.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like, obviously the education aspect and knowing the love language and what those might be, and then you can actually lead children into kind of discovering what theirs is and all of the different aspects that you just talked about. You will get a really good indication of what your kid's love language is going to be. Okay. Perfect. Our family has 4 different love languages. Is that a typical makeup? Like if you look at your family, do you have multiple that are the same, or are you all different? So I'm words of affirmation, quality time, and then as Wendy said before, our kids are gifts and physical touch. Is that a typical? Is that typical? Is there a typical?
Well, I don't know if it's typical. It's true of my family. Mine is words of affirmation. My wife is acts of service. My daughter's quality time, my son's physical touch. So none of us have gifts.
Yeah.
As a primary. Now we all like gifts; they're fine. But so I don't know. It would be interesting to know, really, if you looked at a large number of families, how diverse they would be within the family. But I know it's certainly true in many families. And that's why we can't assume that what makes one child feel loved will make the other child feel loved. And if we don't have this concept that children have, as well as adults, have a different love language, we will just likely love them the way we would want to be loved, so we give them words and all that, but it doesn't register with the child. So that's why this is so important for children, for parents to understand, so they can effectively meet that child's need for emotional love.
And I have a follow-up question to that. What is the importance of a parent to teach their children about their siblings' love language and how to communicate with each other better?
Yeah, I think it's very important, that mommy has a love language, daddy has a love language, sister has a love language, brother has a love language, and we're going to learn how to speak each other's love language. And so, and then additionally, of course, as I said earlier, we're going to speak the other languages. And we can say to a child, for example, here is another way. I know your language is words of affirmation, but here's another way we express love. We give each other hugs. We give each other high fives. That's another way. And, so you just, over the course of the time, you're speaking the different languages and telling them, these are other ways that we speak languages, because I want you to learn how to speak mommy's language, how to speak daddy's language, how to speak sister and brother's language, because we want everybody in our family to feel loved, because I know we love each other and we want each other to feel loved. So I think explaining that whole concept to kids, especially as they get a little older, they get the concept, and they'll buy into that.
Yeah. Can someone's love language change?
I think it tends to stay with us throughout a lifetime.
Okay.
Like a lot of other personality traits. But on the other hand, having said that, I think there are situations, circumstances, maybe stages of life as we get older.
Sure.
For example, a mother who has 2 preschool children, acts of service may not be her primary language, but during those years, it's probably going to jump to the top because she's overwhelmed. Maybe words is her language, and she still appreciates words. But right now, if dad will do this and help her with this, oh man, that is really communicating love to her. So I think there are maybe stages of life and circumstances where another love language may be more meaningful at the moment.
Okay. One of the things that you talk about multiple times in the book that I picked up on, at least, was this idea of making sure that regardless of the love language of your child, that the love is unconditional. And I picked up in multiple different spots that you never can put conditions on the love language of your child. Can you explain that a little bit further or add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, let's take gifts, for example. If you say to the child, their language is gifts, and you know that, and you say to the child, I will go buy you those new shoes you want if you will clean your room up. It's no longer a gift. It's payment for services rendered. The kid next door will do that. They'll come over and clean the room if you go buy them some shoes.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's true. Yeah, right.
So, I think we don't try to manipulate children, by speaking their language, and it has to be freely given. The word grace in the Bible, for example, the word we sometimes translate gift, but grace is unmerited favor. We're not loving them because they deserve it. God doesn't love us because we deserve it.
Amen.
He loved us while we were still sinners. And we love our children whether they obey us or whether they don't obey us, or whether they're kind or not so kind. I think love is unconditional, and it's freely given, not because a person deserves it, but because we choose to love. And that's why love begins with an attitude, and an attitude of wanting to enrich the life of the other person. The scriptures say, let this attitude be in you, which was in Christ Jesus. Who, though he was God, he didn't demand his rights as God. He stepped down on human level with us and then step down further to death. Let that attitude be in you. And the good news is we choose our attitude. Every single day we choose our attitude. That I want to enrich the lives of the people that I encounter today. That's the attitude of love. And the love languages in close relationships gives you an effective way to meet the emotional need for love that child has. But, some people, particularly in a marriage, will have the idea, well, if my spouse would treat me better, then I would treat them better. Okay, so you want to manipulate them, right? In fact, I've had people say, I've had adults say, well, I tried speaking my spouse's love language for 3 weeks and nothing happened. I said, oh, so you're trying to manipulate them, right?
Right.
I said, that's not love. I said,
that's true.
If you choose an attitude of love, I'm going to love my spouse. I don't care how bad they are. I'm going to be God's agent for loving them. And of course, Christians have an outside help. Romans chapter 5 and verse 5 says the love of God is poured into our hearts by the Holy Spirit. So we can love an unlovely spouse, not because we're wonderful and good, but because we're opening our hearts to the love of God and we're becoming his agents for loving an unlovely spouse.
That kind of brings up discipline for me
So awesome.
and kids. And, I've always made a point to tell my children, even if they're in trouble or they're, have to be disciplined, I love you no matter what. This does not change that, but I have to teach you certain things. There are consequences in life. Talk to us about disciplining children inside of the different love language. So, for instance, how would spanking a child who is physical touch, would that be confusing, and so forth?
Yeah. I think if you use a child's primary love language and you use the opposite of that, it is the most severe punishment you can give a child. Wow. And probably never should be done. If words of affirmation, for example, is their love language, and you yell and scream at them in your discipline process, it's like a dagger in their heart. Or as you mentioned, physical touch is their language, and your main method of discipline is spanking the child. I mean, that is severe to that child.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful not to use the opposite of their love language as a means of discipline. For example, if quality time is their language and your method of discipline is to send them to their room and don't come out of your room for 30 minutes, and that's horrible for that child because you're isolating them. Right. So, and I'm not saying you should never do that. I'm just saying, boy, they must have committed a major crime if you're going to do that. Now, here's the other thing. If we understand their love language, we can wrap the discipline in their love language. Let me illustrate. So let's say you have a rule. We don't throw the ball inside the house. We throw the ball outside, but not inside. And if you do throw the ball inside, then you're going to lose privilege. We have to put the ball in the trunk of the car for 2 days, and you won't be able to play with the ball. And if you break something, then you'll have to pay for it out of your allowance, okay? So now they know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. That's always wise. When you make a rule, let the child know what the consequences are if you break the rule, okay? But so let's say Johnny throws the ball in the house. So you say to Johnny, and his language, words of affirmation is his language. So you say to him, Johnny, I'm so proud of you because you almost always keep the rules. But this time you broke the rule and you throw the ball in the house, right? And the vase that was broken, I don't know how much it'll cost, but I'll have to find out. And we'll have to start taking it out of your allowance a little bit every week. And you know what happens? The ball has to go in the trunk of the car, right? So let's go out to the car and you walk him out there, put it in there. And he's probably crying, during this time, depending on his age, of course. But then when you get through with all that, you say, but Johnny, listen, man, I'm so proud of you because most of the time you keep the rule and I love you so much. So you've wrapped the discipline in his love language and he receives it inside. Yeah, he's still hurt. He's still crying, but he understands it now. He's loved even though he broke the rule. And but he probably won't do that again. So I think understanding that concept and trying to wrap it, and some people have said, well, yeah, but what if it's gifts? You're going to give them a gift before you discipline and after you discipline? Why not? I'm talking just something little,
Right.
Johnny, I love you so much. Here, I want you to have this, whatever, a little piece of candy or something. Now, let's talk about what just happened and the rule you just broke, you know. And then again, afterwards, you can say, but listen, Johnny, I love you so much, man. Here, I want you to have this. It doesn't have to be anything big. It can just be something tiny, but it's communicating love to him in the midst of being disciplined. None of us like to be disciplined. We don't like the discipline of God, but
That's right.
it flows out of his love. He wants to give us the best possible life, get us back on track. And that's what we want for our children.
Man, I'm like, my brain is like wide open right now because you talk about this unconditional love aspect, and then you talk about paying attention to love languages inside of discipline of your kids. And then I just like think back to our kids and I'm going, man, did we do it right? Did we get it right? Did we take the right steps? Did we not discipline them the wrong way? Did we do it the right way? And you just like think back. So we are at 14 and 18 and we recognize what the love languages are for both of our kids. What's like our next best step? Like, what do we do best as parents at this point? Is there actionable things that we can do? Is there like, oh my gosh, we have one kid going to college. Have we lost him forever and we don't have the ability to kind of get that relationship back? Our kids are pretty cool and they're pretty great, thanks to you. But how do we deepen our relationship with our kids? Because everything that you've talked about is just deepening relationship and deepening the love you have with your kids. And it becomes such a bond of listening to you talk about these love languages. I envision such greatness and beautiful relationships to come out with our kids, which is sometimes just so challenging right now. What do we do in teenage world right now for Matt and Wendy? What's like a great step that we can take to deepen that relationship with our kids?
Well, I think in the teenage years, it's a good time to have an open conversation with the child. And to say, we've been looking back. You can do it as a couple together, or a husband could just do it, or a wife could just do it. But kind of nice, I think, to do it together. To say we've been looking back over our lives together, and I want to ask you a couple questions. Back when you were young, did you feel loved by us when you were young? We've talked about the love language in our family, and we all know each other's love language. Right. But just looking back on it. How did you feel in those early years? Did you feel loved by me, or you feel loved by Dad, or both of us? Kind of give us a little feedback, and they will. They'll give you feedback.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Ours will for sure.
They will. They'll give you a lot of feedback. Some you might not want to hear, but they're going to give you some feedback.
Yeah, that's right. And the very fact that you ask them that kind of question, and then bring it up into the present tense and say, well, let's talk about now. Because you're teenagers. And pretty soon, one of you is going to be going to college here. On a scale of 0 to 10, how loved do you feel by me as your mother? And then the dad said, same thing with me. How do you feel about love from me? And again, it's a real open conversation, which will give the parents an opportunity to apologize if indeed they're getting feedback that says, well, I just don't know how I didn't feel loved back when you did this and so forth. There'll be a place for us to apologize because we're not perfect. No parents are perfect.
Yeah.
But if the child is feeling that they were hurt or wronged or not loved at a certain time, we need to hear it and not be defensive about it. Because in our minds, we know we love them. Why wouldn't they feel loved?
Right.
Right. So don't be defensive. They're giving you feedback on where they are emotionally and how they felt at a particular time, or something maybe you did, or maybe even to say, is there something that we either one of us did in the past that was really, really painful for you, that really, really hurt you? And if so, they'll share it with you, and it's good to know that. So then you can say, oh man, I had no idea that's how that affected you. Man, I'm sorry. Let me apologize for that, But it's just a good open conversation like that. Mm-hmm. And when teenagers can have that kind of open conversation with their parents, most of the time they're willing to forgive. They're just thrilled that you're open to listen to them and hear what they have been thinking, what they have been feeling. You're actually asking for it. So that can be a tremendously healing experience, sometimes painful, but healing experience. with
believe
parents
that.
and teenagers. Yeah.
And I love hearing you say, apologizing to your children, because that has been a big thing for me. It's something that I share with other moms of like younger kids and things like that when they ask for advice, is I've always, if I was in the wrong, I've always apologized to my child, because that's how I've taught them the importance of apologizing, the importance of forgiving. And if I have to be able to show them what an apology looks like and show them what forgiveness looks like, and what better way is to apologize to them.
Absolutely. I've had parents say to me, but if I apologize to my children, won't they lose respect for me? I said, no, the opposite. No. They gain respect. They already know that what you did was wrong.
Right.
But you apologize. But you're exactly right. We're teaching them a tremendous life skill when we teach them by our model that we apologize when we lose our temper and we yell or scream or we do something else, that's mean, harmful to, and we apologize for that and ask them to please forgive us. We're teaching them something they're going to need the rest of their life, because none of them are going to be perfect.
That's right.
They're going to have to learn to apologize if they're going to have good relationships as adults. So it's a huge skill, and they learn more by our model even than by our just saying those kind of things.
They do, absolutely. Let's run through just a couple quick questions, like one related to each love language. And I think we've already hit on one of these. I believe that we've already touched on this one. For a parent whose child's primary love language is receiving gifts, how do we guard against materialism?
Yeah, I think we did deal with that earlier on, that we don't give them everything that they ask for. Yep. We give them gifts that we think will be, it's fine for them to ask. It's okay for them to ask, but they just need to understand, because we love them, we're going to give them things that we feel like would be good for them, and we're not going to give them something that we think would not be good for them. We love them too much to do that. And even though they may not like that, it's when we tie it into love, I love you too much to do that because I don't think it would be good for you. They may still be grieved that they didn't get it, but they'll get the concept.
Yeah, they understand it.
And I think starting that at a young age is so important, so you don't have them melting down in the checkout line at Target.
Yeah, that's right.
Looking back, I didn't realize that Brody's was gifts, but they knew when we went into the store beforehand, we're not getting anything today. I would set that precedent before, so we weren't like kicking and screaming.
Because he always liked stuff at Target.
Oh, he always liked stuff. Yeah, anywhere we go, did. He can find something anywhere we go.
He still can.
He still can.
Yeah.
I think that was important. If I can, I'd love to ask you a physical.
Oh yeah, you get the physical touch. This is a good question because it's so personal to us.
Yes. So our oldest son who's going to college, his love language is physical touch. He is 6'6". And he is a big guy, and he can't just go around hugging people or touching people on a college campus. That's a no-no. How does he fill that love tank when he doesn't have someone there to hug him and give him that pat on the back and show him love in a physical way? Yeah.
Well, there are appropriate touches that can be done in the college setting. High fives are very, very popular. And knuckle bumps that we learned during the COVID.
Right.
And if he is giving other people high fives, they'll give him high fives. If he's patting somebody else on the back, they'll pat him on the back. So I think we just say to him, you are going to be who you are, and you're going to want to give people, high fives and pats on the back. Just make sure you touch people appropriately and not inappropriately. Yes. And people will do the same for you, because typically, people tend to respond to somebody. If they're doing those kind of things to them, they'll respond and give it to him. And then also, I think in your conversations with him while he's away at college, you can say such things in a phone conversation. If I were there, I'd give you a big hug right now. So you feel my arms around you? Okay.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is how do we show that to him when we can't actually be in person to, give him that hug, because he loves to give big bear hugs.
He does.
Yeah, I think you verbalize it, and the very fact that you verbalize. See, normally we just say, "Okay, love you, goodbye," but if you say, Okay, if I were there, I'd give you a big hug before I said goodbye. Okay, I love you very much. I'm hugging you right now. Do you feel it? All right, I love you. Yeah, they'll get it. They'll get it emotionally.
Okay, that's awesome.
All right, that's good news because we were worried about that.
We are, because
You know,
he is
he can't go around hugging people on campus. That'd be awkward and weird. And at 6'6", 280, big old kid, I mean, it's not a very comfortable
his
thing.
size can be intimidating for sure.
It can be intimidating. That's right.
If you don't know him.
I'm glad we got that covered. Thanks, Dr. Chapman, for that one. For kids who, that crave quality time, how can parents do this practically? I think we talked about this as well, but if you would just touch base on that one more time on a practical quality time for kids.
Yeah, I think it's spending your undivided attention with that child. And so, for example, here's the child, 6 years old, 5 years old, mother's fixing dinner, and he's saying, Mommy, can we play? Can we play, Mommy? Can we play? And his language is quality time. He's asking for what he wants. So if you understand that, before you start dinner, give him some quality time. And then say, now, Mommy's got to go fix dinner, okay? And chances are he'll let you fix dinner without saying, can we play, because you filled his love tank up before you did that.
Got it.
So I think just recognizing the value of that. So if you're going to do some projects that are going to take your time and you can't release it and go spend time with them, give them time beforehand and then say, I hope your love tank is full because I love spending time with you. Okay, now Daddy's got to do this or Mommy's got to do this. And chances are they'll give you freedom to do whatever you have to do.
Is it a good idea as they get older to incorporate them into things like, hey, come cook dinner with me? Dad likes to play golf. Take them golfing with you. Things like that.
Absolutely. Something I did with our children too is we just had a boy and a girl. Like you have 2 boys or a boy and a girl.
Two boys.
Two boys. Yeah. Is I would take them out once a month. I'd take them out to breakfast alone. I just take them, one of them by themselves out to breakfast, and another one out for breakfast. And my daughter, I think, appreciated it more than our son because her language is quality time, and she loved that time. And in high school years, she would say, "Daddy, can we take a walk after dinner?" And I'd take walks with her. My son would never walk with me. He said, "Walking is dumb. You're not going anywhere. If you're going somewhere, drive." So. I think quality time is good for all kids. As I said, we want to speak all these languages. But I think, giving each child some individual time with individual parents can be very, very helpful. And if they're interested in cooking, you invite them to spend time with you cooking or whatever else they're interested in.
That's fantastic. On words of affirmation, what impact do words of affirmation have on a child's self-esteem and overall emotional health?
I think they have a tremendous impact, even if it's not their primary love language, affirming words. And let me just say this. In speaking words of affirmation to a child, don't wait till they're perfect to give them words of affirmation. I'll never forget the time a young man said to me, he said, I can't ever please my father. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, if I make a B on my report card, my father will say, you should have made an A. You're smarter than this. Mm. And later on, he said, if I mow the grass, when I get through, my dad will point out something I didn't get, like the grass under the bushes. And he said, if I play ball, if I get a double, when the game's over, my dad will say, you should have made a triple out of that. Boy, you got to learn how to run.
Yeah.
Right.
I knew what his father was trying to do. He was trying to motivate him to do his best. But you understand what the young man was hearing. I don't ever please my father.
I never measure up.
So what I say to parents is this. The time to help a child bring a B to an A is not the day they bring the report card home.
That's right.
That's the day you praise them for the B. And then a week later, you say, it was really neat that you made a B in that course. I wonder what we could do to bring it up to an A- next time. Well, they're with you, and on the grass, once they mow the grass, you just praise them for the grass. Man, what a great job. I really appreciate this. It's next week that you say, now, I want to show you one thing. This is kind of hard to do. This grass under the bushes, you have to kind of go in and out. But I know you can do it, man. I know you can do it. You bet they will.
Yeah,
so we can teach them things, but don't don't try to teach them at the moment when they've done something already. Praise them for their effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the way it's communicated.
Yeah, a little child, you say, now, put your toys in the box before we have dinner or before we leave or whatever, and you walk back in 5 minutes, and 7 toys are in the box and 5 are still on the floor. And what a lot of parents say, I told you get these toys in the box. No, you say 7 in the box. Man, that's wonderful. I bet the other 5 will jump in the box too, and you bet they will. You know? Yeah. So just keep that concept. Praise the child for effort, not for perfection. Yeah, it's extremely important for parents, I think.
Yeah. You write that physical touch is the easiest love language to use unconditionally. Why is that, or can you elaborate on that a little more?
Well, I just think because by nature we're touchers. I mean, all humans touch. We've had so much about dysfunctional touches at work and inappropriate touches at work and all that people have just kind of said, well, we shouldn't touch anybody. Listen, humans touch. I don't care where they are in the world. I studied cultural anthropology. All humans touch. There are appropriate touches and inappropriate touches. But we are just by nature, we're touching creatures. And so we just have to teach our children that there are appropriate touches, there are inappropriate touches. And we want to learn how to touch people in an appropriate way. And, in the family, we hug everybody in the family, but we don't necessarily hug everybody, that are not in the family.
Right. All right.
I got to run back right before that question because what you said was so powerful about how you treat your kids and the things that you say to them. Because if you get that right, in my opinion, it's a lifetime of just success and how they feel about themselves. But if you get it wrong, and I've seen it, that an adult can have a very, very difficult time in how a parent has talked to them for many, many years. And I'm not going to call you out, but I'm going to call you out because you've battled that in the wrong language from a parent for many, many years. It creates a very big
100%.
It's been very difficult for you for many years based on how you were raised. And I hate to call you out, but we've talked about it many times. And she had a very challenging childhood in that she never received words of affirmation. It was always the wrong thing. It was always that, hey, you didn't do this right. And it's been very difficult for you to kind of walk through that. So I just wanted to say how great I thought it was on how you were talking about how you build kids up, how you can tear them down. And it's the same situation. It's just how you handle that conversation differently. And so I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and even so, I've learned something today. My love language is quality time, and I was sent to my room a lot as a child. Anything, little thing that was wrong, it was just go to your room, and that way she didn't have to see or deal with us or me. And how that isolation and how that affected me, and I think that may be why. I mean, quality time is so important to me with my friends, with my husband, with my children. And I think that definitely played a part, even as an adult, through my whole life.
I believe
and we grew up in very different households. And I will say,
we did.
With discipline, just all of it all together. And your dad did a very good job. You always say that, Matt he played sports his whole life. And y'all would get in the car, and good or bad, your dad never talked about the game. He would let you bring it up, and he never criticized you or said what you did wrong. And I think he did a really good job.
Yeah, it was always on my terms. He let me start that conversation.
Yeah, you've done that with our boys as well. And I think that goes back to your point, Dr. Chapman, of how you communicate failure. Even if it is a failure, you don't just come at them in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for parents who kind of wake up when they get to be adults and realize some of their failures in the past, the first step to apologize to adults can be really hard, but it can be very, very healing. There are a lot of young adults who have fractured relationships with their parents because of what the parents did through those early years.
That's right.
Growing up. And the tragedy is that many of the parents never realize it. They don't accept and understand, how they hurt the child. And consequently, they don't have a close relationship as adults. They may be cordial, but they just kind of live distant from each other. And that's why apologizing for past failures can be the first step often in healing a relationship with adult children.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it was very important for me, because I've had to go through a healing journey myself. And as Galen, one of the pastors here, has taught me, is the hardest thing to do is forgive someone that's not sorry. And so I try to make sure my children understand how to apologize and ask for forgiveness, and as well give forgiveness because of that.
Absolutely. So important. So important.
It is. All right, one more. Acts of service. If a child's love language is acts of service, how do parents avoid their child becoming codependent or entitled?
Well, I think all of us have to speak acts of service from the day they're born, because they can't do anything. We put the food in, we take the food out.
Yeah.
We do it all. And so what we want to do is, yes, do things for our children, but as they get older, we speak this language by teaching them how to do things for themselves. For example, when they're learning to eat, we put the spoon, in the food, and we fly it like a plane. Ooh. Well, that's fine for that little stage, but then we want to teach them how to use a spoon for themselves, and how that, so forth. And what I say to parents is, don't feel like that you have to do everything for a child. Like, I know children who've come to high school and never have made up their bed, made up a bed.
Right.
Well, they're probably not going to make up a bed all the way through college, and when they get married, they're not going to make.
That's right.
No, start early. When they're 6 years old, say, I want to teach you something big for you to do. You teach them how to make up their bed, and they'll start making up their bed. You're teaching them something that they can do for themselves. And as they get older, you ask the child in teenage years, what is something you'd like to learn this year? And then maybe they say, I'd like to, when they start driving, I'd like to learn how to change a tire in my car. Or I'd like to learn how to, something else. Teach them how to wash a car early on. So wherever they are in the journey, we speak this language not only by doing things for them, but by teaching them to do things for themselves. And this child will like that, because they want to be able to do things for themselves.
That's right, they do. And they got it. They have to do things for themselves.
And it teaches them how to do things for others whose love language is acts of service as well.
That's exactly right, yeah. Okay, I've got one more thing that you wrote here, and because I thought that this was kind of a big, bold statement. The primary lifetime threat to your child is their own anger. How does that relate to the love languages? And if someone is facing a child who has a lot of anger built up in them, how do you layer in? I know that we've talked a lot about it, but how do you layer in when you're facing a very angry child? How do you layer in the 5 love languages for that?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, if my child is yelling and screaming at me, where did they learn that? And I have to be personal here, because I remember when my son was 13 or 14 and we got into an argument, and I was yelling at him and he was yelling at me, and we were saying hateful things to each other. And he, in the middle of that, he walked out the door and just walked out. And I just started crying. And I said, oh God, I thought I was further along than this, to be yelling at the son I love.
Yeah.
And I poured my heart out to God and asked God to forgive me. And I prayed that my son would come back. And he did. In an hour or so, he walked back in. And I said, Derek, son, could you come in here? And he sat down, and I apologized. I said, no father should ever talk to a son the way I talk to you. And I know I lost my temper and said some mean things to you, and that's not the way I feel about you. I love you very much. And I hope that you can forgive me, because I don't want to ever do that again. And he said to me, Dad, that was not your fault. I started that. I should not have yelled at you like I did. And when I was walking up the road, I asked God to forgive me, and I want to ask you to forgive me. And we hugged each other and we cried.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then I said, Derek, why don't we learn how to talk our way through anger rather than yelling our way through it?
Yeah.
I said, for example, the next time you get angry at me, what if you just say, Dad, I'm angry, can we talk? And I'll just sit down and listen to you. You can tell me why you're angry. And next time I'm angry at you, I'll just say the same thing. Derek, I'm angry, can we talk? And it was a huge moment in our lives. Because sometimes that question is, where did they learn this? And sometimes they did learn it from us. Not always, but sometimes they did learn it from us. The other thing is to let them, when they're angry, let them tell you why they're angry. Because in their mind, if they're angry at you, it's because in their mind, you've done something wrong. And so let them tell you. It may not be morally wrong, but they'll listen. If they're angry, listen to them. Even if they're yelling at you, listen to them. Don't tell them, shut up and don't talk to me that way. Let them yell at the moment, and you ask questions about what they're saying. Let me make sure I understand this. You feel angry because da 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 da. Well, yes, and da da da. And they'll calm down if you listen to them. They get angrier if you tell them to shut up and don't talk to me that way. For the moment, you just let them yell. Because later on then, when they see you're really going to listen to them and understand their anger and say, I can see how you'd be angry about that, then they realize I don't have to yell and I can just tell them I'm angry and they'll listen to me. Yeah. And that's what we want. We want them to process that anger, not let it build up inside. Because when it builds up inside, they're angry, and then they're angry, and then they're angry. And then one day they're going to explode, and they do horrible things when they explode. That explains a lot of the problems in our country today. Is people have this pent-up anger inside that nobody's ever listened to them. So As parents, especially as they get to be teenagers, listen to them when they're angry. Listen to them. And you can learn together how to talk your way through anger rather than, yelling your way through anger.
Right. It takes a lot of vulnerability on a parent's side to do that, but you're also teaching your child that same vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely appreciate you sharing that story with us. And I know it's not easy to do that, but very much appreciate it. In the book, you give some practical advice as well inside of what you call an anger ladder. So I would absolutely recommend parents, if you pick up the book, read through that. If you're dealing with a child who has anger issues and how to kind of walk through that with your child, putting the love languages inside of that as well. I thought it was just an incredible quote that you said that the anger is the greatest threat to your child. And so I thought that was super important to ask as well. And thank you for that. Do you have any other questions for Dr. Chapman that you wrote down that I didn't cover? We read the book independent of each other. And so how we did, hey, let's get together in kind of real time and talk about it. And I know that she had the questions and she's asked those, and I had a bunch of stuff written down, but we don't want to take up too much of your time. And I will say that we're very excited for you to come back again and join us here at Mount Bethel Church. We had a great reception for you and great feedback when you were here and joined us this last year as well. So it was wonderful to have you and look forward to having you again.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed being there. It was a great evening. I remember it well. And I look forward to being there later on. I think it's next year in March, maybe sometime.
I believe so, yeah.
And I'd encourage parents at Mount Bethel to bring, especially your teenagers, bring your teenagers. I think it'll help them communicate with you better and you communicate with them better, because it did for us. It was
absolutely,
and it was fun. It was fun to learn each other's love languages. It was fun to take the quiz. They're like, "This is mine," and
yeah,
I'm like,
we all
"This
sat
is
down
mine."
together and started taking quizzes and answering questions, and then we're showing it. It's like, "Oh, I knew exactly what you were going to be. I already knew this," and so it was a really fun, family-friendly exercise to go through and then just kind of talk about it. And it was actually really eye-opening once we did that together as a family. So very much appreciate that.
And the kids I'll say, oh, come watch the show. They'll come do this with me. You want to go do this with me? And they're like, okay, quality time. They kind of jab at it, and we do the same thing with Cooper. We're like, come here, physical touch. Let me give you a hug.
We get a big old bear hug.
And, so it's been fun to do We
It's been beautiful for our family. So from a personal thank you, we very much appreciate it. We very much appreciate the book. Our family is the world to us, as yours is to you as well. And we try to do everything right. A lot of times we don't get it right, but we're going to keep trying. But this has really given us a great foundational roadmap. Roadmap's
Yeah.
a great thing to help our family and build better relationships, and we very much appreciate it.
Especially as they go to adulthood.
Yeah, parents, if you haven't picked it up, 5 Love Languages for Children. We just have the regular 5 Love Languages book as well, and you've written more books that kind of go with it. You have Love Languages for Men, you have for children, for teenagers, you have singles, and you have a military edition as well. So there's so many different options when it comes to discovering love languages, building better relationships, and this one is the secret to loving children effectively. And Dr. Chapman, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I know our parents are going to enjoy it very much. Is there any parting wisdom that you can give us as we disconnect on this episode of Talk It Up?
I think I would just say, as a parent, don't put yourself down if you feel like you failed in certain areas. Just acknowledge it to yourself and to God and to your child, and let's make the future different. You know, we can't change the past. We can acknowledge our failures and we can ask forgiveness, but let's make the future different. All of us are in the process, and none of us are perfect. But you know, if we're open and honest with our children, we can find healing for past failures, and we can move in a positive direction. And this book just gives a lot of practical help. I think also at the end of the chapters where I deal with those 5 languages, I actually have quotes from children who have those languages as their primary language. Right. Pretty revealing things. So yeah, and if you do have teenagers, the teenage book would be very, very helpful to you. Because I don't think their love language changes when they get to be teenagers, but you do have to learn new dialects when they get to be teenagers, because some of the stuff you've been doing, they feel is childish now. So you have to learn new words or new ways to do certain things. So, yeah, but it's a journey. We're all on together. But let's do everything we can to have healthy families, because it's the basic unit of society. If we can have healthy families, we can change not only our nation, we can change the world. So
Amen.
Our greatest contribution starts at home, and then it spreads out beyond the home. So great to be with you guys. Keep up the good work. Love what you guys are doing there.
Dr.
Awesome.
Chapman, thank you so much. Wendy, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. And thanks for tuning into this episode of Talk It Up. If you need information or you'd like to reach out to us, you can reach us at communications@mtbethel.org. We will put links in the description for the book and anything else that Dr. Chapman has for us. And again, thank you guys very much. And we look forward to seeing you or hearing you next time on Talk It Up. Have a great day.